like to call the Village of Riverside Board of Trustee regular meeting to order for Thursday, January 5th, 2023. Happy New Year. If we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ethan, if you could please call the roll.
President Ballerini.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Gallagher.
Here.
Trustee Clarity.
Here.
Trustee Marshazga.
Here.
Trustee Hannan. Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Village Manager Francis.
Here.
Village Attorney Molina.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Soul.
Thank you. First on the agenda is the President's Report. All I'd like to say is I wish you all had a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year. We will not be having a meeting, the second meeting of January, just so you can put that on your schedule and properly assess your TV time as January closes. So, anything on the manager's report?
I just have one item this evening. Village offices will be closed Monday, January 16th, in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That is it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is residents' comments. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak tonight? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Clerk Soul, if you could please.
Ratify voucher list of bills December 15th, 2022. Ratify voucher list of bills December 28th, 2022. Approve voucher list of bills January 5th, 2023. Review and file quarterly purchase order report. Review and file 2023 budget document. Review and file fire, police, and public works November 2022 monthly reports. Approve Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes December 1st, 2022. Review and file Police Pension Board regular meeting minutes September 8th, 2022. Review and file Riverside TV Commission meeting minutes October 10th, 2022. Review and file Preservation Commission meeting minutes October 13th, 2022. Review and file Parks and Recreation Board meeting minutes October 24th, 2022. Review and file Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes October 26th, 2022. A resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to execute a contract with Christie Weber and Company for a not-to-exceed amount of $20,800 for the 2023 Central Business District planter bed maintenance. A resolution authorizing the village manager to waive competitive bidding and execute a sales agreement with All Tech Industries for a total amount not to exceed $176,188 for the purchase of a 2024 Freightliner M2-106 aerial bucket truck. A resolution of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to issue a purchase order to Cook County Emergency Telephone Systems Board for the purchase of 8 radios in an amount not to exceed $59,000. A resolution authorizing the village manager to create a purchase order in the amount of $112,500 for Christopher B. Burke Engineering Limited to provide professional design engineering services as part of the Shenstone Road reconstruction project. A resolution authorizing the sale or disposal of personal property owned by the Village of Riverside. A resolution waiving competitive bidding and authorizing the village manager to enter into various purchase orders for fiscal year 2022. An ordinance to provide for non-participation by the Village of Riverside in certain assessment relief provided by the Property Tax Code for historic buildings and for certain residence structures located within the Riverside Landscape Architectural District. Preservation Commission proposed 2023 work plan.
Thank you, Ethan. Do any of these items need to be removed by any member of the board or anyone in attendance? Trustee Pollock?
Item E.
Okay, I would ask for a motion and a second for all items except E.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Gallagher, second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Pollock. Ethan, if you'd please call the roll.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan. Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Thank you. Mr. Pollock?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out
to the board and to the public the goals that are listed in the budget document. I think our staff did a tremendous job with the budget overall. We tend to focus on the numbers as we're preparing the budget, but they've added strategic goals for each department to the budget, and generally they're outstanding. I just want to make sure, number one, that all of the board and the public get a chance to review those and know that those are our priorities. And if you accept them as is, if we approve this budget document, we're accepting those as they are presented. There is one goal that I would like us to have spend some further time on reviewing. In the Community Development Department, it lists a building inspection goal as being 3 days from time that an inspection is requested and the inspection is done. It lists the goals being that the average response time is 3 days. I would like the village to look into that more and see if we can do better. From my experience, that's I've seen a lot of villages who can do next day inspections, and I want to be absolutely certain that we can't do it for financial reasons or whatever the reason is, but I would like staff to report back to us if the board's in agreement at a later date to further discuss that.
Thank you, Trustee Pollak. That's, I think, Ashley, Ms. Monroe, if you could look into that and give us, kind of a synopsis of, staffing costs, how that all works, and report to us at a later date, that would be very helpful.
Sure, I can prepare just a short memo or something like that that could help summarize those issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
That could. And again, I would like to reiterate what Trustee Pollak said. 302 pages of numbers is not the funnest thing to read, but when you have those goals and all that stuff, it really was a very good document. So I recommend, all the residents and to take a look at that and see what we're looking for and see what we've accomplished. It's very good. With that being said, if I can have a motion and a second on.
A motion to approve the item E.
Motion by Trustee Pollak, second. Second by Trustee Gallegos. Ethan?
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga. Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Department, Board, and Commission reports. Do we have any reports tonight? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to pending business. The first is a discussion regarding the IRMA optional deductible program. Director Johns.
Good evening. As part of the budget discussions, we discussed preparing an analysis of the deductible that we hold at IRMA, which is our risk management agency and insurance vendor. Currently, we have a $50,000 deductible. Recently, IRMA did change their requirements of when we need to inform them of our intent to change deductible. So we will not be able to change our deductible until 2024 if we wish to. I provided a brief chart for the board of what the village could save with different deductible levels. In 2014, we moved from a $2,500 deductible to a $50,000 deductible. And during this time frame, we have saved $108,913. If we would have used a $100,000 deductible during that time, we would have saved $166,405. That's just on the deductible side of things. We've also started to reserve that credit, that excess surplus, which has grown to over $1.6 million at IRMA right now, instead of using that as a budget balancing tool each year.
So there's really no reason to discuss this tonight, but this is something we need to discuss in October as we come close to the new.
We will discuss it again in October, just part of this budget process. We said that we'd bring it back to the board, so I wanted to follow through on that.
Okay, and I think it'd be very interesting for us to know how many, where those claims would fall if we had 50,000 or 100,000. What's the impact, especially over 2023 as we move forward, at least the last 4 or 5 years, so we can see where we're at.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Director Johns, first of all, thanks for pulling this together. Just so I understand the numbers, you have here 108,913 is the cumulative savings, or is that per year?
Cumulative.
Okay, so you also have 166,405. Is that on top of the 108 or just cumulative savings?
Cumulative.
So the difference is roughly $51,000 that we would
Correct.
save over a 6-year period?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Pollak?
Would we not need to know, in your summary, it states, "It is important to note that this does not include items paid directly by the village that were not submitted to IRMA because there is no chance of subrogation and would not meet the deductible." Don't we kind of need to know that number to know if this is working or we're saving? Or am I missing something?
Over the past several years, we have started to track that better. The page I referenced was a report from IRMA, so when we discuss again in October, I will have all those figures for the past 2 years.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Director Johns. We'll move on to our continuing discussion, but slowly closing. Ordinance amending various sections of the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance relative to incorporation of TOD, best practice to make other certain changes, and to just amending the official zoning map of the Village of Riverside to establish a transitory development commercial sub-district and changing the zoning of certain properties from B1C to B1 TOD. Manager Siren and Assistant Manager Monroe, please.
Thank you. So this is, you have, I know, a tremendous amount of information before you. This is the first pass at a final look at the ordinance. And I wanted to point out 3 issues that are substantive changes or substantive issues that I'd like to get your input on. One is the issue of office uses on the ground floor. The other is setbacks from residential uses in the B1 district, and the third is site plan review. So it looks like office uses in the B2 Central Business District, we do currently have a regulation in the ordinance that limits the amount that they can be on the ground floor. I just want to verify with the board that that you support removing that regulation that's currently in the ordinance as part of these amendments. And I believe you gave that direction during the last meeting. I just want to confirm that that's the direction that we're taking before moving on.
Nice. That was our consensus, yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The second is a new section based on the discussion that we had during the last meeting in Draft Ordinance 3. There would be setbacks in the B1 districts, so the Harlem Avenue commercial districts. If you have a commercial property next to a property that is a single or 2-family property, there would be a minimum setback requirement. Now, staff proposed for buildings that are up to 24 feet, that minimum setback would be 20 feet. For buildings that are taller than 24 feet, the setback would increase to 30 feet to give a little more separation between those 2 dissimilar uses. And I wanted to get your feedback on that, if you think that that is too small, too large. Is that an appropriate setback?
Any comments? Mr. Hanna?
I thought we already had buildings on Harlem Avenue above that height that would require 30. What are the setbacks there?
They do. It depends on where the property is. Currently, in the B1C district, there is a 20-foot setback for buildings that are over 24 feet. Those buildings may have been built before that regulation went in place. They could be legally non-conforming.
Okay, so we'd be adding an additional 10 feet beyond what those existing buildings are.
For new buildings or additions to
Right, new
existing buildings.
construction to
Exactly.
go up 3 stories. I mean, my thoughts are, you know, we have existing structures that have that 20-foot setback. You know, I've said a number of meetings, you know, I want to make, you know, our Harlem Avenue district as business-friendly and developer-friendly as possible. You know, if we have existing buildings that are 20, I don't see what we accomplish by that extra 10 feet, and would just propose that we stick to the 20 of what exists, as opposed to making a new building be different than what's already there.
Thank you. Anyone else? I would tend to agree with that, because we already have several properties that are over two stories, and to make those now non-conforming And there are, I just think we should stay as simplified as we possibly can. Trustee?
I agree.
Okay. Okay.
Great,
Got
thank you
your
very much.
consensus?
And then the third issue is site plan review. And just a note, and I put at your desk and available for the public, a correction, a clarification of the Planning and Zoning Commission's opinion. They were asked at the last meeting if Planning and Zoning Commission were to not review site plans that did not involve variation, special uses, or plan unit development. So a new site plan or a major change to an existing site plan, which PZC currently does review and make the final decision on. If there were an alternate process, how would they feel about that? And what they suggested is that an informal group of 2 commissioners could meet with staff and the applicant to review the site plan, and that staff would make the final decision on the site plan. I incorrectly noted in the materials that would be going to the village board, and that is the note that you received in your packet. So if you're looking at attachment A, the table showing the current site plan review process, all that information is correct. So if we're considering site plan dash new on the 3rd line down, and site plan dash major change amendment, that is not considering site plans with variations and special uses or PUDs. And you can see currently the decision rests with PZC with an appeal to the village board. So if the board supported, for example, having staff make that final decision, if you look at the table below, the corrected table with the highlighted Ds under site plan new.
I'm sorry, where are
I'm
you
sorry.
in the materials?
I'm sorry, attachment A.
443, the very,
Oh,
very,
the
very.
supplemental things that were handed out.
Yep.
The last 3 pages, last 2 pages.
Yeah, so there's an attachment A, it has 2 tables on it. There's a highlighted D. So you can see the current table is on top, proposed table on the bottom.
Okay.
Now, I know when the board last discussed this, there was some consideration about whether that should be differentiated by zoning district. The Planning and Zoning Commission felt that all zoning districts could be treated equally, but I'd like to know what the board's input is. And we can make the appropriate changes to the site plan review process and the code.
Trustees? Mr. Pollak?
I'm going to need some time to digest this.
Sure.
So I don't really have any conclusive opinions or thoughts right now. I do, though, other than one, and that is that I really am not comfortable with this concept of having 2 volunteer commissioners participate with staff in reviewing site plans. For a variety of reasons, one of which is transparency, and having volunteer commission members making decisions that's not in a public meeting. That concerns me. There's a little concerns like which 2 commissioners and are their decisions consistent from one thing to another. And I think we need to keep in mind what the site plan review process is all about. If a development is fully compliant with our zoning codes and all the codes and policies of the village, and it's commercial development, it has to go, right now, it goes Planning and Zoning Commission for site plan review. Planning and Zoning can ask the developer to do more, but they cannot require it. And so really, in essence, and the village attorney can, maybe I'm putting this stronger than the village attorney would like, but in essence, it can't be denied because it is an as-of-right development. And so when they go to Planning and Zoning Commission for site plan review, the commission can say, hey, why don't you put this fence over here instead of there? Why don't you put these shrubs over here instead of over there? Or why don't you, add some more parking or take away this parking and make it landscaping? The developer will typically say, yeah, sure, if it's not an issue, not a large expense. But if the developer says, no, I meet the code, then we have to approve it. So an example would be with the parking lots on Quincy that just got approved, is my understanding is Planning and Zoning asked the developer to use permeable pavers. It's not required by code. They asked the developer to use permeable pavers. The developer agreed. Everybody's happy. There's permeable pavers. That's great. But if you have two commissioners doing that, what if only two of them think permeable pavers are appropriate? The other four think it's not appropriate. I think we're opening ourselves up for some inconsistencies, and I'm just not comfortable with that aspect of it. I kind of feel like it either should remain as it is, generally speaking. We could maybe lower the threshold, or or raise the threshold and say certain things like minor changes, whatever, don't have to go through it. That's fine. But either leave it at planning and zoning, or make it planning and zoning and board, or just leave it up to staff. And villages do it all those
All different
ways.
Lance, but my question is, if that developer, and we're going to use Quincy as an example, if they agreed saying, yes, you did the site plan review, and yes, I will put in permeable pavers, and then found out that permeable pavers added several $100,000 to the job, and now they no longer want to do permeable pavers. Can they just say, I don't want to do it, or do they have to come back?
Well, so it actually depends a little bit on our past practice to some degree. Typically, if someone agrees to something in a public forum, they would be bound by that. And we discussed this idea, there's no appeal to the village board at this point. It's my opinion that a property owner could, at the very least, ask to go back before P&Z to amend the site plan based on that concern, make a record of it, and then the P&Z could recommend against that. They think, no, we don't think that's sufficient, but as Trustee Pollack pointed out, that it would be in the public eye, it would be transparent. The developer could say, well, but it's not a code requirement, so I'm asking for my building permit because it is too expensive for me. But I think it would be a potential problem for the developer without any other public forum analysis, having agreed to it, to simply tell staff, you have to give me my permit, even though in a public meeting, I agreed to this. So that's my opinion on that.
So an applicant would be bound by what he agrees to in a forum, even though that is above and beyond our codes.
In a contractual sense, right. I think that's an issue. I think the public should be able to rely on what someone agreed to do, and it creates a big public perception problem for people who care about that sort of thing and happen to be at the meeting or track it. And then suddenly the permit is issued and the developer said, oh, well, I said yes, but I just decided not to.
So to alleviate that, so it's not as simple as just saying, just because you asked me, I'm not going to do it. To alleviate that and to keep a streamlined process, an appeal process, we can either do one of two things. One is if everything is, there is no variation or no special use, we treat those properties that are businesses just like we treat the properties of a homeowner. There's no variation, no special use. It can be done just by staff.
The building permit process, and staff often will make recommendations like that.
So that's one option.
Yeah.
Or the second option is have a valve at the back end where if a developer decides that, no, it is too expensive, I'm not going to do it, I can then appeal it to the village board.
You could do that. I mean, the other thing to do is, if I were a developer, and I were sitting in front of a P&Z commission, and they were asking for permeable pavers, and my budget was based on concrete, I wouldn't say, oh, yes. I'd say, well, I don't know. Let's continue this, and I can do some research, or if you're comfortable, since it's not binding, is say if I decide that I can afford it, or whatever, or put a cap. But it's my opinion that once the developer commits, and that's what we're dealing with here, that it creates a kind of an obligation to follow through, absent some other public encounter, if you will, open.
Okay. So I think what we need to think, and I agree with you, Doug, 100%. We're not anywhere near this yet, but we have a month more. Mr.
Yeah,
Hanlon.
I agree with trustees Pollock's discomfort with having an informal sub-board. That just rubs me the wrong way. You know, as this was proposed, you know, do we have the chair? Or, you know, which puts a lot of pressure on the chair to do of the many millions of things we ask Chair of PCC to do. But I agree, sort of this ad hoc roving committee of two people that may change meeting to meeting. You know, having sat on planning and zoning, you know, you can get wildly different results depending on who those two people are at any given time. So I think there's got to be, you know, I appreciate the need for planning and zoning input in the absence of getting in front of this planning and zoning board, but just the mechanic strikes me as too many variables to get a consistent policy approach from the village on what they're going to ask for.
I would agree. I think we all agree that the two-person committee is not necessarily the way we go. Okay. So secondly, what about this proposed new site plan table? Is this something we want to digest more over the I mean, we all want to digest this more over the next month. So, you know, some of the options. Lance, if you wouldn't mind, give us, you work for a lot of different municipalities. Talk us through the site plan. Like I said,
So
Doug's statement that, you know, it's not binding, but then it is binding because some you agreed to it. There's a lot of nuances there, so I want to make sure we all understand those nuances.
Well, so first of all, Trustee Pollock was absolutely correct, in my opinion, when he said that the municipalities on this site plan issue are all over the place. They're all, and that's because the site plan review for non-home rule municipalities isn't covered by the municipal code provisions that deal with zoning. So when you deal with variations or you deal with conditional uses, special uses, there's specific processes that have to be implemented by non-home rule municipalities. There are certain voting requirements that are triggered, and we can't change those. But the site plan process doesn't need to exist at all. You can have your zoning entitlements, variations, you know, whatever the ones, the basic minimum that are there. You follow the zoning code, you comply with the building permit process, you get a building permit if your zoning is applicable, and that's it. But we certainly have the ability to create a site plan requirement, and then when that is triggered, the jurisdictional trigger can vary. So in the case of Riverside, it's commercial developments. You have major, minor type adjustments which try to delineate when it's appropriate to require a property owner to go through this extra hoop, and that can be varied. And so they can be made, the site plan review can be made, you know, mandatory in certain respects. We'd have to look at when that would be optional, what kinds of things it could be, but basically it's a way to make a property owner that meets the jurisdictional trigger go through additional review to achieve, ideally, things that are beneficial for the development and the village. But, you know, certainly it can be a staff review where the site plan review goes out to the engineer and an architect, or the planner reviews it, and they make suggestions, and then those things that are agreed to go into the plan when building permits are sought. It could be, you know, again, from a legal perspective, I think technically you could probably get away with what the P&Z Commission said, but I think it does create some potential even legal ambiguities about what it is. And it wouldn't be Open Meetings Act concerns, because they were careful to have only two, but one could argue that those two then are a committee. You know, and then there's no posting, and there's no, so I think there could be issues there. So I think probably good that you all don't want to go that route. But then the other option is P&Z. You could leave it. You could change the triggers. You could have it, site plan review be applied or required in a narrow number of cases that then come right before the village board. Or you could have it go to P&Z, and the property owner could have an option to go before the village board for further analysis at the property owner's option. Those are all available.
Okay.
And depending on, what sort of input you want to have on what a site plan looks like and your goal to be user-friendly for applicants, including commercial, as you're trying to get more commercial uses and better commercial uses, you try to blend those so that they're all reasonable and fairly easy to use.
Okay, so my question is if we could have it, we can do different ways. We can do a hybrid where some
Yes.
things come in front of the board, some things go in front of PZC, then final decision with staff. Other things where they're more complicated or PUDs, and they would come in front of a board. We can also have an adjudication process or where the applicant come in front of the board. Now, if the applicant comes in front of the board and the planning and zoning had made a recommendation, let's say the pavers, the applicant says, no, I don't want to do that, they can come in front of the board. Is it treated the same way as a variance where it would need a supermajority?
No,
It would just be a
it
majority?
would be whatever the village board decides the process would be, but there's no voting requirement or limitation on that.
Okay, that answers my questions. Anyone else? Mr. Polley?
Yeah, I just wanted to go a little bit further on this issue of the example you used, President Ballerine, of, the permeable pavers. They agree to it at a public meeting. Then after the fact, they figure out, oh, I really don't want to do that. It's too expensive, whatever. And I get it, so that means they have to go back to the planning and zoning for a new site plan approval. If they had said from the beginning, no, I don't want to do it the first time, and the Planning and Zoning Commission said, well, we're denying it, and they sue us because they think they have an as-of-right development, are we in a better legal position there than we would have been, than if they go back the second time and say, no, we changed our mind, and they still deny it? Does that, in the end, is it the same?
I think it's the same.
Yeah,
in
that's
the
what
end.
I
Yeah.
would have thought. So either way, the developer's going to get his way because it's not required by our code.
Right.
I mean, one of the lessons out of that is we need to look at our code and say, why aren't we requiring everybody to do permeable pavers? But
Yeah,
that's
and then you could,
that's
then
a
if you,
different issue.
and then
but-
if it created undue hardship for a unique reason, you could seek a variation from it.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. The only other thing I have to say on it is, I'd like to see the code clarified and be absolutely clear that when it's commercial development and there's variations or special use or PUD, that site plan review and approval is required by planning and zoning and the village board. Because that's not the case now.
Right now, it's just the
Well,
planning and zoning.
right now, the way it was interpreted before was that even if you're asking for a variation or a special use, there's site plan approval by planning and zoning only, but they're not tied to the variation or special use. It's just two separate things. I think, in my opinion, I don't know how you judge a variation or a special use or a PUD without seeing the site plan. That's not the current position of the village, and I think it should be. So I'd like, I don't expect an answer or anything now, but that's something I'd like to see included in this
Okay.
consideration.
As long as we have an opportunity to, give a developer or whatever an opportunity to come in front of the village board, the elected board to plead their case and give it a must, and trying to be as developer-friendly as possible and protect our residents. So those are all the things. So I think we got a good start at it, so thank you. Thank you, Ann, I appreciate it.
Thank you very
This
much.
document looks good. So I think the next step would be to accept the ordinance. It's September or February, next February meeting, and then we would do the site plan separately? Or we want to do that all together?
Let's get this ordinance passed and do the site plan separately.
Okay, so I would agree.
Please.
Anybody else? Mr. Pollak?
I did want to, not related to the three items that were brought up, I wanted to revisit our review of ordinance number 3 in the B1, and I just want to make it clear, hopefully this was somewhat clear when we discussed this, but I am not comfortable with that particular ordinance I'm not comfortable with the changes we made regarding maximum setbacks, building heights, and front yard parking. It really concerns me that, if the board, if the village wants to create ordinance that allows traditional suburban drive-through restaurants with parking all around the building and all that, you don't have that. You've kind of got a hybrid of both. My preference is not to allow that, to require, as we do now, a more urban set of development regulations, but the changes that we made at the last meeting go in different directions. They're not TOD, they're certainly not, they're anti-TOD in a certain sense. So I just want to let the trustees know that as it is right now, I won't be voting for that ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Hannon?
Was that in the Harlem Avenue corridor?
TOD, yeah.
The B1 part, right?
Okay.
Right, the third ordinance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay,
Great.
thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. We move on to new business. Tonight we have a resolution amending and renaming the banner sign policy to a banner sign display and e-flash social media posting policy. Clerk Sol.
Good evening. So staff is recommending some updates to the banner sign policy, including renaming it to incorporate other avenues for organizations to publish items about events and other public service messages. So the updates would permit material for community events or other public service messages to be published on the village's website via an e-flash notification, which can be sent to email addresses or phone numbers by text, and on village social media accounts, which would include Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. The requirements to post public service messages or promote community events on those outlets will match the requirements largely for the banner policy as it stands currently. Eligible organizations would be 501c3, 501c6, and 501c8. They must submit an application, which is included at the back of your packet, to the village clerk, and that content would be reviewed by myself and village manager Francis. There are several items that will not be allowed to be posted as included in the updated policy that is redlined. There will be no promoting or debating of any political or social issue and so forth. Eligible messages would include non-political fundraising, community events, community announcements, celebratory announcements, and other public service messages as well. The village will be able to refuse or withdraw any application for posting, and organizations similar to the banner policy will be limited to a maximum of 4 per year. Any questions?
And if I may, there was one item that's come up in the past, and while I've taken care of it at an administrative level, I just kind of wanted to close the loop with the village board on it. I've gotten feedback in the past from residents and members of the public about the board may notice that usually it's on an annual basis, we'll get a request from St. Mary's for their annual registration. And so I've been questioned about that in the past and how that particular banner is judged and reviewed is similar in alignment with the eligibility organization. They are eligible as a 501c3. And that particular messaging is in alignment with a community announcement similar to if District 96 had their registration notification. While I understand that it's a private school, there are also other items that are put out there as fundraisers or fees, but are of public interest or a public announcement. So I just wanted to close the loop on that particular one to make the board aware of it. In speaking with Attorney Molina this evening before the board meeting, I was made aware that how I am reviewing it is what is legal. And so I will turn it over to him as well, just so that the board is aware in case they get any feedback from the public as well, as it relates to this particular item or something that is similar.
So this is something that actually came up before this evening. We were aware of that application. It might have been a year or two ago, and there was a resident that questioned it, and we just gave the opinion that it should be allowed because you can't single out religious uses for different treatment from other qualifying uses. And the thing that has changed since then is the U.S. Supreme Court case in the City of Boston case, which involved not banners, but flags. City of Boston had a flag policy where it allowed different groups to have their flag raised along with the city flag and the U.S. flag. And they had an application for a flag that had a religious connotation. They had never had one before, and they denied it. And their reasoning was that they thought it would promote the establishment of religion. There's the Establishment Clause, which is one part of the First Amendment, but there's also the Free Exercise Clause. And the U.S. Supreme Court said the City of Boston violated the First Amendment by rejecting that particular flag because it singled out a religious message for different treatment from the others. And so, that I think is that was the warning that we thought. We had said we thought that the right thing to do was to allow that. So it's my opinion that that's the correct way to approach it.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Evans?
So I think that we can hone in a little deeper on the discussion. I think that just because you fall under one of these nonprofit categories, that doesn't mean that we have to accept everything that you want to give us to promote. So what I would like to do is limit ban usage to eligible agencies for promoting charitable fundraising and community events. So churches, anybody under those three categories could use it for just these certain topics or these certain events. I don't think the banner should be used by private entities who are recruiting people to join their organizations or businesses, for example, a private school. I think we could be more flexible for public entities like Parks and Rec and public schools who are bound by, mandates and laws to provide education, what they call a free education. And yes, we do have these resources, but we are still ironing out how we use them for our own marketing purposes. I think that's something to consider. And I don't think the village should become a one-stop shop for all nonprofit marketing needs.
Mr. Hannan?
Yeah, given the fact that this is expanding to e-flashes and social media posts, it's one thing to hang a banner that used to be between two beautiful oak trees, but since we lost those between two poles, I think this needs to get tightened up. I agree with Trustee Evans that, I'm troubled by the community announcement aspect of if you're a 501c3, 501c6, 501c8, and you want to promote your programs, your for-pay programs, and not just St. Mary's, but, the various preschools that are here, the various, philanthropic, that maybe have a great exhibit that they're going to charge $50 a piece to. Is that something that, should be at a community announcement? I want to make sure that we have non-political fundraisers open to these C3, C6, and C8 organizations. I think that's important. But this general, I think Trustee Evans said it best, advertisements is I'd hate to see someone going to our village website and getting an advertisement for some, in effect, some school or activity that's, not publicly accessible, not free. That's where, and also I think community announcements going to, government village, Parks and Rec, that makes sense. That's promoting our village. That's promoting our village government. So just want to throw that out as maybe one way to approach this concern.
So, and if I may, part of this came up because on an annual basis, actually, the village would even prior to me starting with the village, would announce, person of the year. And that was just kind of on an annual basis. And then when Hop Stop started, because they're a good partner of the village, we would put out that information too. The problem therein lies, and that's why changing or creating a policy of how are we treating individual entities consistently? Because then I think it was Friends of the Library had reached out to the village and said, hey, we would really like ours too publicized. And so from that standpoint, it becomes an equity thing. And so making sure that we're consistent, we're not inundated. And so I think putting a cap on it helps. Of no more than 4 times a year. So it's not, well, I'm going to do one banner and then I'm going to ask for you to publish. You're not getting multiple bites at the apple. So similar, it's probably, from my perspective, more efficient to do a social media post than to have Public Works going out and hanging up a banner. Because then there's not allocation of village resource. I mean, there's an allocation of obviously my time and or Ethan and Amy's time. But it's more efficient, and especially if it's a fundraiser, to pay for a banner versus to say, hey, can you put this information out there?
And I was distinguishing between fundraiser and community announcements of open enrollment. And that could be that could be preschool, that could be a regular school, that could be Irish step dancing classes, whatever you think it is. I don't feel comfortable allowing that as an e-flash coming out from the village. It's different than, hey, we're having our pancake breakfast, or Presbyterian is having its strawberry festival. That's a fundraiser. That's an event, not a, here's a deadline to give us money for a service.
Yeah, that's the distinction I was also trying to make.
Yeah, so I'm not sure legally what that distinction would be. I mean, if it's a qualifying entity and they provide a service, whether it's an art exhibit or educational lecture series, and they charge a fee, they're probably doing it in part to recoup costs and partially to raise funds as well. To just have it only apply to a straight fundraiser and there can't be any provision of service related to it. I mean, I suppose you could try to make that distinction, but it just seems to me to be somewhat troublesome in an ambiguous sense.
Yeah, I think there's a distinction between a fundraiser, one-time event versus sign up for this private school.
It's enrollment. It's not, we're raising money for the greater good. It's, we want you to pay private tuition.
I guess. I mean, I think what if a nonprofit sponsored an art exhibit and they charged? Would that qualify or no? Because
Charged for what? To raise
for
money?
admission.
Because Hopstop raises money for the climate.
For admission.
That's fine. Would St. Mary's or any other private school in town be raising money for a charitable cause, or would it just be to run their business?
Well, I mean, I think what they would say is the education is their mission. That's what they're doing, and they're charging a fee to recoup some of the costs, all or whatever. I'm not sure that there's a hard line you can draw there between. To me, if they're a qualifying 501c3, if they're a qualifying tax exempt, everything they do really is related to that mission, which was approved by the Secretary of State to get their.
I guess let's take this out of.
Ed, hold for a second.
Again.
Ms. Clarity?
Just to jump in here, I would prefer that the village avoid as much as possible being the arbiter of what content is appropriate or not. I don't want to put our village staff in that position. I don't want to put the liability of that on our village. We're having a hard time understanding or deciding what is appropriate. And so I would just, as a high-level statement, like us to avoid being the arbiter of that. My personal view is I would like to see less entanglement of our village platforms for communication with things that aren't directly related to the village.
So if I could just interrupt, that you can do. So the one important thing to get out of the First Amendment jurisprudence is that government has a right to speak. And if you recall, at the Pride Month issue, the advice we gave there was rather than create a flag policy, if you were to pass a proclamation and direct staff to fly a certain flag in commemoration of whatever it is, that's government speech. And you're not, and so if you limited the banners just to whatever the village decided to put up to advertise stickers or whatever, you could do that. But
Right, but I appreciate that, and my view is that it's not complicated to get a social media account. It is not complicated for these organizations to come up with their own platforms. My view is our village communication should be pertaining to the village or the business of the village or information that is important for residents to have in our view as the village. As a person who reads the e-flashes also, on a personal note, I think if you stuff 30 more of those through, they just become noise, right? And then they don't get read. So that's my view, is I don't think we should get involved in this, and I think we should tailor our communication to what's important to the village and let others increase their presence in the way that they want to.
I agree. I personally worry that if we put things on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page, we become the advocate. It's now village speak, and I would rather have village speak be for village.
So then, to be clear, then moving forward, we would not publicize Person of the Year, Hop Stop, or anything from the library, for Friends of the Library, or any other organizations.
I mean, I never thought it was appropriate to be helping agencies talk about Person of the Year, because at times there has been a very faded distinction between what is an organization's Person of the Year and what's village's Person of the Year. Like, I think that, I don't remember which one it was, but they even call it Riverside Person of the Year, but it's actually, is it the Lions Club Person of the Year?
No, it's Riverside Person of the Year.
But who decides it? Is there a village board
It was
commission?
decided by the Chamber of Commerce and the Lions Club, and then the Chamber, because of the state that they're in, kind of stayed away from it. So, but the person who's named is not a Lions member.
But if it's decided by the Lions and the Chamber of Commerce, that's not a village.
It's not a village government.
Right.
Naming of it.
So it's like all or nothing, it seems like.
Now, there's gonna come an event where, like, we'll have to close down the streets for certain events, like the holiday stroll and for cruise nights, which are.
But that's village, that's
But
sponsored.
letting us know, or letting residents know, hey, this street closed, that we have to put out there. I mean, that's just public safety.
So there's a difference with the events when it's a village sponsored or in collaboration with the village. So July 3rd and 4th is in collaboration because Parks and Rec has a huge lead as it relates to that particular event. Raw, when they had the fair, was, in collaboration with the village and Parks and Rec.
Farmers market,
The
too.
farmers market, thank you, cruise nights, all of that, there's that partnership with the village. And so, and the village plays a role as part of that. And so the delineation is when we have like Hop Stop, it's not necessarily a village event. It's something that is specifically done by that organization. While we could always publicize the volunteer days, that is done in coordination with Olmsted Society, because that's in coordination with Public Works Department. So those types of, so there is a hard line of, we have these different groups within the community, and we advertise it. Historically, we've advertised it with banners. And so it's twofold of, if we don't want to do this, that's fine. And so then we as a staff, have guidance then moving forward of when we get these requests or what have you, we're not doing them. And that's fine. Because the board's never really had the discussion, and it's just been kind of past practice that has been carried on through different administrations. And so, but I think the bigger piece is now this other discussion about precluding certain groups, and then, so the banner policy would stay just the banner policy, but then we've got to, or I guess the other question is, does the board just adopt on an annual basis, here are the approved banners for the year?
No,
Do we
I
know
mean,
that?
I think that what Jessica was getting into about the affiliation with the village is important, because those events are government speech, they're village events. And so they could be approved, and you could reject any proposal saying, well, we saw this banner and we think our banner should be there, right? But if it's a village-sponsored event, the village gets to pick which events it thinks are worthy of its participation in. And so that wouldn't be discriminating based on viewpoint, because it would be government speech. And I know this is going to get it may seem a little tricky, but government gets to speak. Like, if you allow one entity to say, we want you to fly our flag, or we want to rent your room, or we want you to let us use your room for a meeting, and then you reject the next individual without a policy that's content neutral, you are getting into First Amendment trouble territory. On the other hand, if you pass a proclamation, as many municipalities have done, involving issues of gun control, or municipalities back in the 1990 passed, 91 passed resolutions against the invasion in Iraq. Many did, many passed proclamations in favor of it. I mean, that's government speech, and you aren't discriminating. That issue solved at the ballot box, because you get to say what proclamations, what policies you want to support. So as long as it's government speech, as long as it's part of a government involvement, a village event, a village program, and you're not, as a courtesy, allowing a separate group to post, you can limit it to that. And I'm comfortable with that, because it's government speech. And
I agree with everything that's said here, especially the fact that, yeah, if you get too much into social media, all of a sudden it becomes noise. So I want to walk a very fine line, especially when it gets to our social media. It's my thought, and I think that's.
And as Jessica pointed out, both don't need to be consistent. You could say, we want our social media page to be only for village issues, but we do want to continue with the banner. Or you could make them consistent and say, we're changing the banner to only be village-sponsored events.
So let's take this now in two parts. Let's take the social media post. Are we all in favor that social media posts should be limited to only government speak?
Village
Yes.
information, yes.
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 Okay, that's done. The banner policy, do we want to adjust our banner policy to be the same in line with that? Or are we comfortable with the way the banner policy is now? That's the second question. Mr. Pollack.
I've always been a little bit concerned about the banner policy, even when we adopted it. We say 501c3, no political purpose or partisan purpose. But I'm not sure that, and the assumption there is that every 501c3 is apple pie and motherhood and, beautiful and wonderful. And that's not I don't think that's the case. I think there's 501c3s out there that may be contrary, or I'm not sure what the right terminology is, that may be of concern to people. So I need to know more about what our limit really is right now, and I would be interested in seeing if we can fine-tune it a little bit. I'm not ready to jump right in to say only village events, only village government speech on the banners. I'm not quite there yet, but I may get there.
Could we look at, or Ethan, can you look at banners for 2022 and see how we could see what our track record is, how we can make this tighten this up? I think we all agree with the social media policy, but I think we all want to at least tighten up or make sure we're completely comfortable with our banner policy as we move forward.
I can pull a list from 2022,
Just-
last couple
just a
years.
thought,
I mean,
just to
I-
think
yeah.
about that, and let's.
The thing you're going to find, I think, is the minute you want to allow private messaging of any kind, you're going to have to accept the fact that there may be content
Yeah, we don't.
that you don't, that the majority of you don't like. That could very well happen, and there's not anything you can do about it because it has to be content neutral.
So we either, our real option is government speak or the Wild West, with 501, with.
It's
all
the
these-
safe, I mean, with those qualifications that you have, but yeah, I mean, and I guess it is good to know what the history has been to see, but that's, if, I want to make that clear, that we can't go to, one, Jessica really can't have that responsibility,
Right. I agree.
and two, it's constitutionally problematic.
With that being said, I would lean towards government speak, but I think we all need to think about this for at least let's postpone it till February. We'll read it again then. Is that good?
So what we'll do then, since we're saying take all the social media out of it, is we're going to give you our old policy back. Because it sounds like it's ripe for some sort of,
Tweaking.
yes. And also on that basis too is contemplating if we're going to kind of pare it down to become more limited in our banners, we may not need the posts that are over by the water tower. The reason why they were installed was more Parks and Rec centric, and then items that were going on, community related, whether it was concerts or business related, farmers market, et cetera. So I just wanted to kind of
But
put
those,
that out there.
but concerts and the businesses, or concerts and the farmer's market would still be government speak.
Correct, by paring this down, we may have more availability in Guthrie. Because remember, quite some time ago, we only had the trees in which we hung the banners from before we had the posts. And that was even prior to that, we never really did it over by the water tower, with the exception of vehicle stickers, which were just the very generic posts that we would put up annually that looked horrendous, and that's why we installed the beautiful black posts that are currently there.
I just have one more thing to say, and that is with respect to the banners, I do like being able to see what is going on in our community with other organizations being sponsoring events or fundraisers or whatever for the betterment of our community. And if there's some way that, we can continue to have this, but applied in a, content neutral way, I would really like to keep that going because it connects our residents with one another and perhaps exposes them to, socially beneficial ideas that they might not otherwise see. So,
I mean, maybe the
That's my
answer
2 cents.
is, if it's government speak, let's just use a hop stop, for example. Can the government be a sponsor of an event like that, even though it's a fundraiser for somebody else?
I think so. You could we would do it with a resolution or something, that if you think the event should be, the board feels like it's worthy of, it provides public benefit, the board could issue a proclamation,
So that gives us the opportunity to be a little more selective, am I correct?
and in that instance, the proceeds do go towards purchasing trees and other
Okay.
things.
So let's.
But are we not back where we started with that, where we are being the arbiters of what
Well, this
is
board
appropriate
is.
or not?
It would have to come before the board. I'm not making that.
I don't want to be the arbiter of what, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you'd be open, yeah, anyone would be able to ask, and you'd have to,
All right, well, that's something, let's chew on that.
One other thing, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Can we have a consensus on the banners?
We don't have a consensus
No.
on the banners. We're just
Okay.
we have a consensus on the social media posts and things like that. The banners, we're going to strip it out. Banner policy is going to come back to us at the next meeting the way it is, and then we can we can chew on that with a little more information.
Not to get too much in the weeds. So we're regressing back to our old banner policy, so this goes away, Trustee Evans. But also, given the feedback from the board, typically in the past, we've done annually, usually it goes out, I want to say March or April in the water bills, we will do a list of community events, which include Hop Stop, which include Car Show, which we're a sponsor of, so that's fine. I believe we might have Person of the Year and some other events, and so just so the board is aware, we have still a little bit of time, but based on whatever that feedback is, those may be stripped from that comprehensive listing. So that's another piece that was put together several years ago. I think it was based on different feedback of commissions, EDC, the branding about it would be great to have one consolidated location to see all of the different community events. So people like it because they plan accordingly of what's going on in Riverside. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that too.
Okay, we'll have the banner policy in front of us next in February. Ethan, thank you for all your work on this.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. We move on to trustee reports and the Cross Community Climate Collaborative C4. Trustee Marszalska, Ms. Evans, do you have any updates?
Absolutely, we do. The C4 team for Riverside had its first meeting on December 12th. We are including representatives from the village, the township, District 96, and a variety of other community groups. With the support of the C4 consultants and village staff, we have come up with a community conversation starter called Our Road to 2050. This is an event that will be held on Thursday, January 19th at 7:30 p.m. in the Village Hall Auditorium. And we're basically having an activity that will give our residents, young and old of all different backgrounds, an opportunity to help shape Riverside's future. So we're going to be asking residents how their input on the types of challenges that we currently face, how they would like to see Riverside look in 2050, and how we can get there. We will also be hosting an online survey in both English and Spanish on the C4 Village webpage with a comparable series of questions for people who cannot attend this meeting on the 19th. So we're very much looking forward to connecting with the community on this. As all of the input that we receive as a team, this will be the driving force for our roadmap development for a sustainability plan for Riverside ultimately. We expect to have all the responses summarized for presentation to the village board at our February 2nd meeting. And then at the C4 team meeting in February, we will review all of that input and data with an eye to climate, equity, and resiliency. And then team leaders will start reaching out to people in the community who have come forward and said that they want to help. So by early summer, our team should have an analysis and some proposed next steps to share with everyone.
Thank you. Good?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Trustee Marszalska. I don't think people realize how much work this is. I don't think she realized how much work this is going to be. But she has been really doing a lot of networking. She put together almost the entire sustainability team, which was not an easy lift because it meant recruiting people to take on a big responsibility, a big part of this, the team. So I just want to thank you. I know we're just getting started.
And thank you too. It's been great. I mean, we've had some wonderful, interactions working with people, and I'm just very energized. I'm excited for the whole thing going forward because we're off to a good start.
You got something on your shoulder.
Doug?
No, you.
It's here. It's fuzzy.
Oh, I thought it was a bee. All right, go ahead, Mr. Hannon.
Oh, good. I'm not quite sure if this is the trustee report, it may be just Ed Hannon speaking as a resident.
Are you still at C4?
No,
Oh, are we still on C4?
We can be, yes.
One comment on C4. Do we have a board meeting on the 19th?
No, it was
We do
canceled.
not, we do not have.
Good deal.
One other question.
We planned all of this.
Yes, I assumed that
very
was the
carefully.
case, but
Okay, but that brings up a point. We're going to have trustee Marshazga and trustee Evans at the C4 meeting. That means, what does that do for the rest of the trustees?
Ideally, I think, because it is a community conversation and we will be talking about things, the best way to go about this would be maybe to answer the online survey, so we're not all in the same place at the same time. Is that?
So three of us will be there?
No, just two of us.
Oh,
So that's fine?
But if anybody else from the board is interested in, participating in the process,
yeah.
but can't physically be at the meeting because it might raise Open Meetings Act issues, then they could participate through the online survey because we wouldn't.
Right, that's not a live interaction, it's
Correct.
input. Yeah, that would work.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so for the rest of us, please scan the bar and have your voices heard. Thank you. Thanks for all the work both of you have done. Thank you very much. Anything else, Doug?
no.
Okay, Mr. Hannan.
yes, thank you. Not sure if this is the right place, probably speaking as resident Ed Hannon as opposed to trustee Ed Hannon, but I wanted to just commend the Village Library Board. There's been a request made at the board to pull a book from the collection, and, it's never easy to be a volunteer or hold a public office in Riverside. It's all volunteers, all people trying to do the right thing. And just want to commend them for the way that, they've addressed this, focusing on their mission, that they don't promote censorship, that they don't promote particular views, and that the supervision of minors' access to materials rests with the parents and the guardians and not the librarians. Given the topic of the book, transgender and queer topics, I like the idea that our library provides that resource for young people who are struggling, that they can go to our local library and find that resource, find that material to figure out what are these thoughts in my head? Why am I different? Who can I reach out to? And our library continues to be a resource for all people, any sort of educational materials, and do so without fear. I just want to commend you for how you've handled that. I like the approach of moving it out of the teen session, but still making it available in the graphic novel and not bending to censorship, which I think is a very slippery slope. So just wanted to raise that and say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hannan.
May I?
Claire?
I'll echo resident or trustee Hannon's comments, whomever might have been commenting there. I'll just note that in 2022, book bans in the United States schools and libraries are at their highest since the American Library Association began tracking. These book bans typically seek to limit access to books that offer empathy, knowledge, and power to young people, and they disproportionately affect books by and about LGBTQ and people of color. So I stand also in support of our library, our teachers, our kids, and our families who are standing up and speaking out on this issue. And I would encourage anybody interested in this issue and learning more to consult the American Library Association's Office for the Intellectual Freedom for more information.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I definitely agree with these residents here. I think they're making some excellent points. I, too, as a resident, appreciate that the library responded with professionalism and with reference to its collection development policies in declining to ban this book. By the way, for those who don't know, the book did receive the 2020 award from the American Library Association, the Alex Award for young adults literature aged 12 to 18. So the placement, seems appropriate to provide a resource of high quality for our youth.
Thank you.
I'll say something. I echo the trustees here. They've made great points. Thank you, President Ken. for your leadership, and I appreciate the leadership of the other trustees also. It's disappointing that this conversation has just touched our village. The thing that bothers me the most is that it becomes a harmful discussion, even with all the support that we have here in the village for, maintaining our collection. There's still a level of bigotry that is fueling this discussion, and that's harmful to people, the kids that live in this town. And I don't know if that's something that people think about when they decide to, make the decision to come in and ask for censorship or removing a special book.
Thank you. Well, it isn't, I agree with all of you resident trustees sitting up here. It is important to remember, regardless of how someone may feel about a book and its content, it's not our place to remove a book that may be helpful to someone else in our community. It should not matter if a book is applicable to me or make me feel uncomfortable. It's important that to recognize that the material may be helpful to other people in our community, and therefore we should not be censoring materials. I have full confidence in our library board and its staff to determine what's suitable for our residents of Riverside and how it should be monitored. So, again, Ken, thank you, and thank your board, and thank your staff. Okay? With that, is there any other comments for tonight?
Aberdeen,
No?
1875.
Oh,
Continue.
we can do that another time.
All right, we'll wait.
The board does not have need for an executive session this evening, so I would like to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Gallego, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Marshaga. Ethan, can you please call the roll? I should have that down pat right now. Ethan.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshaga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Motion carries, meeting adjourned.
No.
Thank you.